Alright everyone, had to get into it with an ANCAP so-called last night on Twitter. I'm not sure whether this person is a fan, like follows me, or whether they were just attracted to the issue. But I'd like to point something out that I'm not sure a lot of self-proclaimed libertarians fully realize. I've had several people over the last 24 hours said I was a neocon because I support the concept of regime change in North Korea. But I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you why that is not comparable to Saddam, Gaddafi, Syria, these other issues that people are trying to conflate with it. North Korea is a state that has threatened the United States, threatened multiple non-nuclear states, specifically threatened with nuclear weapons that they possess. It is a credible threat. Saddam Hussein, when he occasionally made an off-the-cuff comment about how he loved to destroy the great Satan, ultimately never had an atomic program, a limited chemical stockpile, and no real ability to assault us and most of our allies. People at the time, of course, were worried, I think, more about, Israel might get attacked by the evil Saddam, we must save them, which explains Netanyahu's happy words when talking about how great it would be if we liberated Iraq. That was propaganda. Gaddafi, again, propaganda. No threat really had been issued in decades. Gaddafi never had an atomic weapons program, never had really the inclination to work towards such things. North Korea does. Now, the propaganda that I've mentioned comes in the form of the last intel report. I am not convinced that it's legit. I am not convinced that North Korea has attained miniaturization. I'm not convinced they have 60 atomic weapons, which would be a much more formidable stockpile than the 5 to 10 that as late as last week we assumed that they had. Last I heard, not long ago, it would take them years to achieve miniaturization. All of a sudden I hear, oh yeah, they've already achieved it. By the way, they probably have working multi-stage ICBMs, not just those crude prototypes they fired off into the ocean. I'm not sure that that's true. I'm not sure that I trust Uncle Sam when he's telling me that that's the case. I think it looks like war propaganda and the lead up to an attack leading to occupation. And I oppose any U.S. occupation of North Korea. The South Koreans can move in. And they aren't going to lead to a panic scenario in which millions of North Koreans kill themselves, flee across the Chinese border, or prepare to fight. But if U.S. troops show up, yeah, they're all going to fight. Because they've been told since the time they were little kids, hey, the Americans were here before. They started eating people and shooting small babies in the street and hoisting them on pikes. That's what they're taught in North Korea. Our presence in North Korea on the ground would be a total, complete disaster. Give all the air support, the anti-missile support, the naval support you want, but do not march into North Korea and interact with the local population. It'll be a bloodbath, because you'll have several million angry North Koreans conducting guerrilla warfare, which means our losses will mount up at least into the tens of thousands. All of them will die, leading to the large-scale depopulation of many groups within North Korea. As it is right now, if it were just South Korea showing up, a lot of the North Koreans might say, oh, thank goodness, and defect. No, I don't think it's naive to consider that the fact, but let me think of it this way for the libertarians out there saying, oh, Styx has gone war-hawking neocon mode. I'm against war anywhere else. North Korea is slightly different, and here's why. If I walk up to you with a knife and I say, I'm going to stab you, you piece of crap, essentially. At what point in the attempt to stab you is it okay for you to defend yourself? Is it just the fact that I have a knife and I say, hey, I'm going to stab you? Do I have to start pulling it off my belt? Can you react then? Do I have to lift it up and make a move towards you before you react? Do I have to be actively plunging the knife down towards your chest before you react? Or do you have to sit there and wait until I skewer you and then you can defend yourself? At what point is it not violating the NAP to prevent me from stabbing you? That's the big question, and you can extrapolate this to the North Korean situation. I had somebody last night rambling about how the US and ROK conduct war games, in South Korea and South Korea's territorial region, And that's an antagonism of North Korea, so it's okay if they start threatening nuclear reprisal. Don't you see how those are slightly different situations? If North Korea wants to conduct drills, which they do, who cares? Nobody's going to get nervous at that. By the way, North Korea has already attacked South Korea on multiple occasions. They've already attempted to infiltrate South Korea for military purposes. They've fired artillery off at South Korean territory. They've fired missiles off into Japanese territory now for the first time over the last few weeks. They've already violated the NAP of both of these nations, which happen to be military allies of the U.S. If you were to come up and say, hey, I'm going to stab your friend and start drawing a knife on them, wouldn't you be justified in preventing you from doing that? Nobody at the moment is attempting to say, oh, we're going to nuke Pyongyang, we're going to kill every North Korean. That's not what's being said. It would be so stupid. Only a complete madman would think that was a good idea. We would be condemned by everybody else in the world if we deployed nuclear weapons against North Korea, unless they've already conducted a strike elsewhere. It's not going to happen. If we were to strike North Korea, we would use conventional weapons and attempt to deteriorate their atomic capabilities so that they couldn't use them in a response. Then you've got no problem. You don't have World War III. You don't have an atomic exchange. Even if North Korea launched an atomic weapon by sub at Honolulu or Guam, we probably wouldn't respond with nuclear weapons, because it would be too lopsided. Their primitive atomic arrangement is not capable of posing an existential threat to the United States. But what if they were to use one on Japan or South Korea? I think the response would probably be nuclear, because those are non-nuclear actors. Somebody would have to push back and prevent them from continuing that. At what point can we say the DPRK has violated the sovereignty of its neighbors, which are not even nuclear states? South Korea doesn't have an atomic program. Japan doesn't have an atomic program. Look, Japan could probably field hundreds of fully modern nuclear weapons in less than a decade with a concerted effort. They've got the economic potential, they've got the engineering and scientific expertise, and they can easily gain access to the raw materials. They've got nuclear plants already. It wouldn't be hard for them. They have held off and been pacifistic for so long, and yet this other state repeatedly threatens to turn them into a lake of fire. The same is true of South Korea. They never endeavored towards nuclear weapons. But the look, war is inevitable on the Korean Peninsula unless North Korea ends up destabilizing and the regime changes internally there, and whoever comes in charge says, oh yeah, we want reunification, fuck this communist shit. The stated goal of the DPRK is reunification by force, by invading and attacking South Korea, overrunning them, and taking that over for Juche, essentially. Well, that's not going to happen. If they ever attacked South Korea, we would have no choice but to respond. Are we going to wait until half of Seoul is gone? Until, 3-4 million people died, but we reunified the peninsula. Great job. But we have a chance to reunify them now, and we have a justification. Not this latest report. Not this likely propaganda of them being super spooky, and now they can put atomic weapons on a long-range missile, and by the way, they have better missiles now, so you should be scared, and they've got 60 of them. They'll destroy all of California. They'll rip Hawaii and Guam to shreds. They'll assault Anchorage. They'll destroy Nome. Oh, communism, Reds under the bed. Not because of that. They've always been a threat. It's always been a threat to several allies within the region. We are treaty bound to defend them. If they decide it's a good idea to attack South Korea, with tensions running as high as they are, one of those artillery barrages they used to occasionally fire at some islands could lead to open warfare within minutes. Is anybody paying attention to this fact? It doesn't make you a neoconservative to think that you should defend yourself and your allies against the credible threats made by other nations. That puts them apart from Saddam. His threats against the U.S. were not credible. He's sitting there in the Middle East, nearly completely landlocked, with virtually no naval presence to speak of, doesn't have an atomic program. Him threatening to attack the U.S. or its allies was an empty and hollow threat and should have been ignored. By the way, we ignored threats launched by North Korea against us until they had atomic weapons. because those threats were bullshit. They weren't going to do shit. Now they can do shit. What would happen right now is that in order to prevent them from attacking South Korea, especially, probably Japan, in order to prevent that, you need to strike them, because they're obviously not going to dismantle their various weapon systems on their own. You have no choice but to intervene. If we intervene right now, if we had intervened 20 years ago when Trump first began, oddly enough, talking about needing to do so, they wouldn't have had atomic weapons. Could have only been a conventional war, and North Korea would have suffered badly. They would have been ripped apart, and half of those people there wouldn't have taken up arms. There were better, arguably, relations between the U.S. and North Korea in the days of Kim Jong-il anyway. Clinton gave them free nuclear help. Said, oh, this is going to be a good deal. Did you know this, by the way? You might have seen it on Twitter. Bill Clinton struck a deal with the North Koreans back in the 1990s. Oh, we're going to give them nuclear energy to improve their economy, and in return, they promised not to develop nuclear weapons. Well, that really worked out well, didn't it, Bill? It wasn't even a decade later that they had their first prototype atomic weapons. And then little W came along and said, that's unacceptable, and if you test one, it's a red line you're going to be crossing. And they tested them, and little Bush did absolutely nothing, because he was a coward. He was a war hawk, but he didn't want to get involved there because he thought it was better to do the whole nation building for corporate profit thing. Then Obama came along and said, oh, don't worry, their economic model can't possibly work long term. We'll just sanction them. And of course, China never agreed to those sanctions because Obama was weak too. And so it didn't matter. Most of their economy was, hey, we gave coal to China. We gave minerals to China. They gave us rice. Hey, they gave us a few weapons. Wonderful. Works out for everybody. Hermit Kingdom stays afloat. Trump comes along. He's been consistently saying since the 1990s we need to hammer him hard, and we need to do it as quickly as possible if negotiation proves a failure, because otherwise down the road they will be a credible atomic threat to every part of the U.S. All North Korea now has to do is figure out how to mount these missiles of theirs into a sub, and they can attack Washington. They can attack New York City. There are other nuclear states in the world that don't even have a sub-deterrent. Why do you think North Korea fields so many submarines in the first place? What do you think their fucking end goal is? Their fucking end goal is anyone that attacks us gets nuked. And so we can overrun South Korea, and you're not going to do jack shit about it, because you won't dare respond because you don't want your cities hit with atomic weapons. That is what will happen down the road. When that happens, though, unfortunately, we'll have no choice but to respond. And we'll end up being hit with multiple atomic weapons when that happens. The North Koreans will march into Seoul, and they'll say the U.S. won't dare respond. We've got long-range ICBMs. We've got decent atomic designs. We can launch them from subs that we can idle in electric-only mode near their shores, and they can't even readily see us necessarily. They won't dare to respond. But the U.S. in that situation will not back down, if only to keep our own nuclear deterrent credible. We have no choice but to attack. Because otherwise it looks like we're afraid of this little state with a few atomic weapons. What does that mean for if Russia goes and attacks some ally, or China, or so, or India or Pakistan get into it, or something like that? It means that our own deterrent becomes useless. MAD breaks down. Guess what? That leads to our imminent annihilation. It's all the grand chessboard. We can't do that. So if we don't take care of this fucking problem real quick, we're going to have much, much bigger problems down the line, because it'll take the form either of nuclear war or nuclear war if we don't do something about the situation. For a nuclear power like North Korea to invade and attempt to annex a non-nuclear state allied with the U.S. will plunge us headlong very close to World War III. Right now we have the capability of making it a regional conflict, of launching a preemptive strike to save as many South Koreans as possible, to overrun their military as quickly as possible in hopes that the North Koreans defect, and so they don't have to be shot at, to take care of the problem before it comes a true modern nuclear state. We have that capability. They've already threatened to stab us. They've already drawn the knife. At what point are we allowed to respond? They've already threatened to stab our allies. They've already drawn the knife on them too. What are we supposed to do? Sit back and say, yeah, don't worry. They can't actually nuke Washington, D.C., so somehow that matters in respect to South Korea and Japan that they've actively threatened. Their posturing suggests imminent invasion of South Korea at some point in the future, the second that they get a true modern nuclear deterrent. They don't even need fully modern nuclear weapons. Look, they're not even attempting to manufacture tritium. Why do you think they're not bothering? Because ultimately the average person doesn't really care if a 10 megaton weapon or a 10 kiloton weapon is launched at Washington, D.C. The fact that there was a nuclear strike at all is going to make them averse to getting involved in any scenario where that may become possible. That's what North Korea is hoping for. They're hoping to develop enough of a deterrent so they can go massacre the South Koreans, force them to reunify with them on their terms. That's their stated goal and position. And then the same person who was trying to debate the point, they're like, oh, North Korea has a right to maintain its sovereignty. That's not the point. Nobody cares if North Korea simply exists. Yes, it's a brutal regime. It has atomic weapons. If it's not threatening its neighbors with them, nobody really has a problem. Washington, D.C. is not going to invade a country for just having a rogue nuclear program. If that were the case, we would have invaded North Korea long ago without a goal of reunification. With a goal of, hey, we're going to flatten your nuclear program that Clinton gave to you. We would have done that. Never happened. Simply having a few rogue nukes doesn't seem to stop us from buddy-buddying with Israel. Supposedly the Iranians want such weapons, and I don't see any response really there other than some half-assed, lame-ass sanctions. I don't even think Iran wants nuclear weapons. And there's another difference. Some people are trying to conflate the North Korean situation with Iran, specifically the deal struck. They're like, oh, well, we struck such a deal with North Korea in the 90s and they developed nukes anyway. And we've struck a deal with Iran, so they're going to get nukes. I see no compelling evidence Iran has an active nuclear program in the weaponized sense. I see no evidence of that. North Korea, though, always did have one. We gave them free nuclear material while they had an active program. They moved the program, say, oh, don't worry, it's gone now, and that's all that happens. The Iranians haven't moved anything. They're actually cooperating with most of the aspects of the deal. North Korea never did, and we didn't do shit about it. Totally different scenario. So don't try to use the sticks as a neocon and wants to have a Rock 3.0 card. This is a totally different situation in every possible military and diplomatic term. And it's the one place in the world we might actually do some good with a proper strategy. Look, it never benefited anyone to oust Saddam. It never benefited anyone to oust Gaddafi or try to oust the legitimate Egyptian government or the Syrian government under Assad. Korea is different, though. There's already a state that can reunify the peninsula, and it would have just as much claim as North Korea itself in its own stated mission. It's South Korea. Let them go in on the ground. Bomb everything to shit before they have to march in there. We destroy as much of the artillery as we can. We target their airfields. We target their navy, their tanks. And then South Korea has carte blanche. What's going to be standing against them? Partisans. Partisans and a handful of starving soldiers that will be already probably in shock at that time, just seeing the kind of weapon systems they're facing. Order would break down. Kim Jong-un would probably be dead. Even if not, is he still going to be able to communicate with people? Like, do they even have the technological means to communicate across most of North Korea once the power goes down? It's not even clear. They don't have that sort of modern apparatus. Their navy, other than their subs, is a joke. That's why they focus on the subs. They want submarine-based missiles. That's kind of the point. Everybody loves those. Because then even if you get nuked, you can still avenge yourself at least. It's like if the U.S. got nuked tomorrow by some other country until we were incapacitated internally, like even our land-based ICBMs become useless. We have so many subs out there with so many armed nuclear weapons on them that it wouldn't matter. Whoever nuked us would get completely fucked up. They might not even survive. Russia's the same way. They've got the same tech. North Korea wants it. They desperately want it. And so that's really the goal. So don't tell me all this bullcrap about being a neocon. You should know better. I'm a minarchist. I'm not an ANCAP, though. I don't think that it's simply, oh, well, this other state, it would be wrong to attack them even if they're apparently planning to attack our own territory of Guam, which it's a hollow threat, but it's a credible one. We may assume with 99.9% confidence that they're not actually going to attack Guam preemptively because they're not insane. What if they are? Have we thought about the vague possibility that maybe it's not just propaganda and some of these people really are off their fucking rocker? We do have to take that into consideration. We can't assume that every actor is rational anyway. I prefer the explanation of simply they've already violated the NAP. They've already issued credible threats against 2 non-nuclear states and against the U.S. The threat has become credible over time. They at least have 5 to 10 atomic warheads and are trying to gain miniaturization, and they have a half-assed, semi-modern, multi-stage ICBM prototype. That alone makes them dangerous enough so that when they're issuing these threats, there's a justification. The South Koreans would already be justified if they attacked and invaded tomorrow. But can they do it alone without, losing 10 million lives? Yeah, I think we should get involved. Not on the ground, from the air and sea only. And we'll probably lose some ships and planes in that endeavor, but the death toll will be far, far lower than if we march in and all those North Koreans get nervous enough to take up arms. We'd be facing a bloodbath. The millions of them would die, tens of thousands at least of U.S. soldiers would die. It would be a freak show. It would also cause Trump probably to get impeached, and I think he knows that. Because people would see that death toll, declare him a lunatic, even a lot of his core fans would assume that was correct. Whereas if we run a successful air campaign and we decapitate Kim Jong-un's atomic capabilities and his artillery, and South Korea handles it, maybe with Japanese naval presence, then there's no problem. He would be looked at as almost the messiah of one of the worst nuclear situations you could have, which is, hey, North Korea just decided to launch a bunch of atomic weapons at its neighbors. You solve that, if Trump manages to solve that problem, and he's talked about it openly for some time, yeah, he would be hailed as really, really good on foreign policy. As for China, people are saying, oh, China might nuke us if we... China's not going to launch nuclear weapons at the U.S. over trying to save North Korea. They'll march in too, probably end up in combat with some of the soldiers on the northern end because they're going to go in and want those coal seams and mineral deposits up there in those mountains. That's what they'll be involved in. The rest of Korea will be reunified, the Hermit Kingdom falls, and China just gains sort of a miniaturized vassal, might grab up a couple of atomic weapons, not that they really need them. That's what they'll be concerned with. They'll stand aside. They're not going to come in direct conflict with U.S. forces. That's just not going to happen. They're not, China's totally sane. They're not crazy enough to do that. That's about all. Peace out.